Hello, and thank you for joining me today. Over many decades of proving this point right, it's important to remember that legality does not mean safety. You need not look any further than my grandparents' generation to see that once upon a time, cigarettes were believed to be harmless, and you'd often see the father of a home light up cigarettes inside the house with his children nearby. The mere fact that the government had indicated that cigarettes and tobacco are legal resulted in the full adoption of smoking without a second thought. Now we know the dangers of tobacco and nicotine products. Rightly so, the first thing that comes to mind when thinking about tobacco products is the fact that they contain cancer causing chemicals. But the part that is often overlooked, and the topic I will be covering today, is that there are addictive chemicals all around us, and we just simply do not understand the consequences yet. Like our grandparents before us, we can easily fall into a trap that we just did not know existed. While growing up, I led a decent life, and I would be remiss if I complained about my childhood. But regardless of that fact, I still fell into a life of addiction. I am here to discuss the nuances of microaddictions and how certain seemingly innocent chemicals can contribute to different neurological effects that were not foreseen. We already have a good understanding of how nicotine and caffeine affect us. The National Library of Medicine's study on caffeine and its effect on dopamine production showed us that it blocks endosine receptors and releases adrenaline. The endosine and dopamine receptors are very close to each other, so in turn, they affect each other. The adrenaline directly affects the dopamine receptors in our brain as well. Nicotine increases blood pressure and releases small amounts of adrenaline, resulting in a similar feeling of euphoria by the same active effect. Regardless of our sheer intelligence as a species, the human brain is just simply not clever enough to discern the difference between something artificially releasing these chemicals versus our own brain releasing the chemicals by natural processes. This artificial creation of important chemicals causes the brain to think it overflowed itself, so it stops producing these different important chemicals. Over time, pardon me, over time, the brain will stop producing the chemicals completely because it expects more intake of the artificial supplement. The Cleveland Clinic found that this action of stopping important chemical production is exactly what leads to substance abuse, dependency, and addiction. However, there is a chemical that is arguably more dangerous than nicotine and tobacco, while being thought to be far safer. Sugar, just like tobacco, is seen as safe because it's legal. And just like tobacco, we are now finding evidence that it is not as safe as we believed. Another study from the National Library of Medicine on the study of sugar showed that sugar activates multiple reward responses in the brain, and one of those responses was the same as the reward response that was activated by cocaine. We know that about many of the effects of sugar on our bodies in regard to weight, like how it affects dietary problems, increases effects of obesity, but high sugar diets also lead to increased anxiety, higher rates of depression, increased memory problems, and slowed cognitive function over time. We are now only starting to understand the effect that sugar is having on our minds. These seemingly harmless chemicals all result in an increase in extracellular dopamine production. By increasing the dopamine production, new neural networks are formed. These changes are made inside your brain, and you cannot sense or feel these changes. But over time, the new neural pathway that was developed make you more susceptible to addiction in the future. The body starts to crave the excess dopamine production, and this results in drug-seeking behavior. As referred to by the Cleveland Clinic, this drug-seeking behavior on a lower level is simply sugar cravings or the feeling to go smoke a cigarette throughout the day. As a species, the natural reward response helped us to be able to navigate our world. It naturally helps avoid harmful things and naturally draws us to things that make us feel good. However, as society evolved, the overabundance of these chemicals is resulting in everlasting damage that we just simply do not understand. Above all, We need to remember that legal does not always mean safe.